For almost all of human history, we were basically a footnote. We weren't a big deal. Before we built cities, before we planted a single seed, before we ever wrote a single word, we were just another animal trying to get by. So how did this one kind of insignificant ape end up running the entire planet? Well, that's the incredible story we're going to get into. Look at this. This handprint, pressed on a cave wall 30,000 years ago, it's one of the oldest messages we've ever found. It's just so simple, so powerful. It's a distant ancestor screaming across time, I was here, I existed. But what's truly wild is thinking about how long it took before we could even make a mark like this. For millions of years before this, our impact was so small, we were practically invisible. And this is the part that's really hard to wrap our heads around. We love to think of ourselves as the end goal of evolution, right? The big winners. But the truth is, for most of our history, we were stuck squarely in the middle of the food chain. Sure, we had our little dramas, our families, but so did chimps and elephants. We were, and I mean this, nothing special at all. And if that wasn't mind-blowing enough, get this. For most of that time, we weren't even alone. We are so used to being the only humans on Earth that we've completely forgotten this incredible, hidden secret from our past. We once had brothers and sisters. So let's rewind the clock. Our whole genus, Homo, first shows up in East Africa about 2.5 million years ago. Pretty soon after, early humans start spreading out across the world. And here is the truly astonishing part. As recently as just 100,000 years ago, there were at least 6 different human species all sharing this planet at the same time. Our situation right now, being the only human species left, that's the weird part. It's a very, very recent development. And what a family it was. You had the famous Neanderthals in Europe, super brawny and built for the cold. Over in Asia, you had Homo erectus, the upright man. These guys were so successful, they survived for nearly 2 million years. That is a record we are probably never, ever going to break. Then you had the so-called hobbits on an Indonesian island, a whole species of human just a meter tall. And get this, in a cave in Siberia, we found a single finger bone that introduced us to another lost relative, the Denisovans. Okay, so what was it that set our species, Homo sapiens, apart from the rest? Well, the very things that defined us actually came with a massive price tag. Our 2 biggest evolutionary bets, a gigantic brain and walking on 2 legs, were incredibly risky upgrades that had some really serious downsides. First, let's talk about the sheer cost of thinking. Your brain is only about 2 or 3% of your body weight, but right now, just sitting there, it's sucking down a staggering 25% of your body's energy. 25%. Compare that to other apes, whose brains only use about 8%. Our jumbo brain is an absolute energy hog. So, to pay for that massive energy bill, we had to make a trade-off. Evolution essentially had to divert power from our biceps and send it straight to our neurons. What that means is, while a chimp can't beat you in a game of chess, in a straight-up fight, that same ape can literally tear a person apart like a rag doll. For millions of years, being so physically weak was a huge problem. And walking upright, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Your hands are free to make tools, you can see over the tall grass. Great. But it also cursed us with a lifetime of backaches and stiff necks. And for women, it created this massive evolutionary headache. It made the birth canal narrower. At the exact same time, our babies' heads were getting bigger and bigger. So, how did evolution solve that problem? Well, its solution was to have us be born way too early. Think about it. A baby horse can run in just a few hours after it's born. A human baby, it's completely helpless for years. That vulnerability forced us to build incredibly strong social bonds. It takes a village to raise a child, right? But it also gave us our secret weapon. Because we're born so unfinished, we are unbelievably adaptable, ready to be shaped and molded by whatever culture we're born into. So, for a long, long time, even with our big brains and our fancy tools, we were still pretty marginal creatures. The real turning point, the thing that lit the fuse on our journey to the top, was the day we tamed fire. About 300,000 years ago, humans got control of fire, and it changed absolutely everything. All of a sudden, we had a reliable source of light to keep the darkness away and warmth to survive the cold nights. It became our first real weapon, a way to keep terrifying predators like lions away from the campsite. But the biggest revolution of all happened when we turned that flame into the world's first kitchen. See, cooking fundamentally rewired our bodies. It made things like wheat and potatoes, which are totally indigestible when they're raw, into superfoods. And look at this. A chimpanzee spends 5 hours a day,
5 hours, just chewing its food. Humans eating cooked food, we spend about 1 hour. All that saved time and energy meant we could evolve smaller teeth and shorter intestines, which in turn freed up even more power for our super greedy brains.
So, fire is what really started our climb up the food chain. But it is so important to remember where we came from. We weren't these mighty hunters right from the get-go. No way. We were scavengers. We'd wait for a lion to make a kill and eat its fill, then we'd wait for the hyenas to have their turn, and only then could we sneak in and crack open the leftover bones to get at the marrow inside. And that incredibly sudden jump from the middle of the food chain all the way to the top seems to have left us with some deep psychological scars. I mean, apex predators like lions, they evolved over millions of years to be on top. They're born with this deep self-confidence. Us, we made that leap so fast, we never really had time to shake off the anxieties of being the underdog. And one theory suggests that this deep-seated fear and insecurity about our own position is what makes us so uniquely cruel and dangerous. Which brings us to the final and maybe the most haunting question of all. If the world was once home to so many different kinds of humans, why are we the only ones left? What happened to all of our siblings? Okay, so picture this. About 70,000 years ago, our ancestors, Homo sapiens, start spreading out of East Africa. And they're moving into Europe and Asia, lands that were not empty. They were already home to other humans, like the Neanderthals, who had been living there for hundreds of thousands of years. For the longest time, scientists were split on what happened next. Was it a love story or a horror story? The interbreeding theory suggested that as sapiens met these other humans, they mingled and merged together. But the replacement theory told a much darker story, one of conflict, competition, and ultimately extinction. Then, in 2010, genetics dropped a bombshell. After scientists managed to map the entire Neanderthal genome, they made a stunning discovery. It turns out that modern people of European and Middle Eastern descent have between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. And soon after, they found that Aboriginal Australians and Melanesians carry up to 6% DNA from the Denisovans. So what does all this mean? Well, the truth seems to be somewhere in the middle. It wasn't one big happy merger. Sapiens and our siblings were almost, but not quite, totally separate species. So interbreeding was possible, but it was pretty rare. It looks like it was mostly a story of replacement, but a few lucky genes from our long-lost relatives managed to hitch a ride on the Sapiens Express right into the modern world. But if they didn't all just merge with us, why did they disappear completely? Well, there are two main possibilities, and both are pretty grim. One theory is that we were just better at hunting and gathering. We just slowly outcompeted them, and they starved. The other possibility is much darker. When you consider the terrible things humans have done to each other over tiny differences in skin color or language, it's not hard to imagine that the first encounter between Sapiens and Neanderthals ended in the first ever ethnic cleansing campaign. And that leaves us with one final, really provocative thought. Our complete solitude on this planet makes it easy for us to see ourselves as the pinnacle of creation, as something fundamentally different from every other animal. But just imagine, what if the Neanderthals had survived? Would we still think we were so special if we could look another kind of human in the eyes? Maybe, and this is the chilling part, maybe that's exactly why they had to disappear. They were just too familiar for us to ignore, but too different for us to tolerate.